You with us today? James, can you unmute yourself? Or aren't you really there behind the screen that has James on it? Well, James, I won't be able to give you credit for coming to class because I can't see you. I can't hear you. And I don't know. You can chat. Somebody checked on the chat to see if he's trying to tell us something. If he doesn't chat anything, then there's no way for me to give him credit for being here today.
There's nothing on chat.
Okay, well, we're just going to have to give up on James. He could not answer the question. Vanessa, I'm giving you a shot. What is the answer?
Direct materials, direct hours, and manufacturing costs.
Direct hours would be incorrect.
Direct labor.
So you got direct material, direct labor, and what else?
Manufacturing overhead.
All right. Jasmine, is she right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Women are usually right. So believe them. Okay, Sherry, here's the next question because the women are getting all these answered. The schedule of costs of goods manufactured. What are the three manufacturing costs that belong on the schedule of costs of goods manufactured? The man, direct man, manufacturing cost. Wait a second, do we have to change that word because it has man in it? Shouldn't we have a neutral? Like person manufacturing, person factoring. Oh, okay. Deshante, go ahead and pipe in. You're a man.
Yo.
What goes on that schedule of cost of goods manufacturing? Is she 100% right, or you want to adjust what she said? She said direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. Is that an accurate statement?
I would say so.
Well, not exactly.
I mean, I'm a man, so I must have to agree with
J
the wrong
Mill,
one.
that's right. You're a man. You can be wrong. J Mill, do you know? You have any inkling?
What was the question again?
Oh, I'm going to have to go to Gregory. Maybe the man, Gregory. Greg, does anybody call you Gregory? Greg?
Yes.
Just your mom. Gregory, get over here.
No, some of my friends call me that too.
Oh, some of your friends. So
Yeah.
most of your friends don't call you that?
No.
Oh, okay. Maybe they're not your friend then. If they
No,
call
they have nicknames.
You have nicknames like Zero?
Yeah.
Like the one you're wearing today?
Yeah.
What does that mean, Zero?
It's one of the albums from Smashing Pumpkins.
No, not from Smashing Pumpkins. I heard that's a punk rock group.
Yeah. I like him.
But does Savio like it? Savio, what do you say about Smashing Pumpkins? No, he has to take his headset off. He was listening to Smashing Pumpkins. Oh, you got to unmute yourself. You haven't played this game very long, have you? Zoom class. Yes.
I'm sorry. You're talking about the band?
Yeah. Do you know?
Yeah,
which
I love
band
them.
You like them?
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Pretty good.
I don't listen to them a lot, but they're good.
All right. How about, did you ever listen to Blink 182?
Yeah, when my sisters listen to them a lot, so I
Yeah.
kind of grew up on them too.
Yeah, you kind of grew up on them. They disbanded though, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. I used to have a lot of shirts by them too. I remember
Did ya?
from like Hot Topic and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you should be wearing that because Greg's wearing Zero.
Oh yeah. I'm trying to put my mic into this laptop.
That's all right. You fool with that. Let me harass another student.
There you go.
Okay, now somebody that knows. Conan, can you tell us, be more specific? You just can't give me three general manufacturing costs. That's correct. But specifically, when you're preparing the statement or the schedule of cost of goods manufacturing, what do they go in as?
Raw
No?
material, work in process inventory, and manufacturing overhead.
Did you say work in process?
Yeah.
Jared, work in process is incorrect, is it? Jared, what do you say, Jared? Do you say anything? Any comment?
I don't think that would be right.
Okay, Vanessa was saying something.
No. I was just eating.
Grateful Dead, that's an old rock group. That's one that I remember.
Don't tell me you were a deadhead.
No, I wasn't, but you must be with that kind of banner behind you.
Sure.
Oh, I was before that time. I was a Rolling Stone guy. I was Jumpin' Jack Flash. All right, let's go on to who knows the answer I'm searching for, because I asked you to write it down. Tyler, let's go to Tyler.
Are you talking about the manufacturing overhead applied to work in process?
Thank you. Thank you. Tell me exactly. Direct materials go in as what?
Direct materials go in as
Estimated amount? Is it an estimated? Is it an applied amount? Is it an actual amount?
Oh, they go in as an estimated amount.
No,
But-
that would be incorrect. That would be incorrect.
Oh,
It's not estimated. Who would know? Who would know? Probably Clarissa. Should I call on her again? All right, Clarissa, tell everybody.
I don't know, honestly.
Oh, you're kidding me. You disappointed me. Who can rise to the occasion? Somebody had to take notes when I mentioned it last time we were discussing this chapter. Justin remembers he thought the first half of the chapter was easy, but he can't even tell me which cost. Wait, Greg's saying something. Greg, I'm all the way in Peoria, Arizona. You're way up there in Page. We're at two different P locations in Arizona, and the internet connection is kind of, breaking up. Try it again.
The last time that you spoke, you were doing the T things and under
T accounts. I was doing T accounts.
Yeah,
Why would I do something like that? Holy cow! Are T accounts used kind of to help people learn? Is it a representation of the account, the general ledger account?
Yeah,
It has a debit side and a credit side.
Yep, on the debit side it says actual, and there's indirect materials, indirect.
Oh yeah, which account shows actual?
Manufacturing overhead.
Yes, what kind of an account is manufacturing overhead? What kind of an account is that?
Indirect.
Is it a permanent account? Temporary account?
Temporary.
It is temporary. So that means it has to be closed out at the end of the accounting period. They also call it a clearing account. You got to clear it out. What needs to be cleared out?
You can clear it out to either cost of goods sold, or you can be more.
No. It's a manufacturing overhead. Either it's over or under applied. When is it over applied? When the debit is greater than the credit, or when the credit is greater than the debit? When it's over applied, or is that or how about if it's under applied? Can you tell me about over or under applied?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
When it's over applied, it's, I think on the credit side is the balance.
Oh, you think? Well, let's look at it. If the credit side says, oh, is the applied amount and it's greater than the actual, and the debit side, which are the actual cost, the applied is really, you calculate the predetermined overhead rate. How do we calculate the predetermined overhead rate? That was chapter 2. Deshante, can you tell us how you calculate predetermined overhead rate? We had 2 problems on it. We went over it last time. How do we calculate predetermined overhead? Do we use the actual overhead, the estimated, or the applied overhead when we calculate predetermined overhead rate?
The numerator would be the estimated manufacturing overhead cost.
No,
and the denominator would
the
be estimated
manufacturing
allocation
overhead
base.
cost. The denominator should be what? The
Estimated allocation base.
The allocation base. What could the allocation base be?
It is the direct labor hours.
It could be direct labor hours. What else could it be?
Direct labor cost and
Could
machine
be direct
hours.
labor cost, machine hours. So yes, it could be many different things. but that is the allocation base. That belongs in the denominator. Tell me what belongs in the numerator. Is it the actual overhead, the applied overhead, the estimated overhead? Is it the estimated all manufacturing costs or just the estimated manufacturing overhead cost?
The estimated manufacturing overhead cost.
That's correct. You take the estimated manufacturing overhead cost divided by the estimated allocation base. That gives you the predetermined overhead rate. That's the predetermined overhead rate that you're going to apply to actual allocation. So if it's based on machine hours, you would take the predetermined overhead rate that took two estimated amounts to arrive at a predetermined overhead rate. You took that and you multiply it by actual, whatever the actual allocation base happens to be. If it only took 10 direct labor hours, then we're going to multiply the predetermined overhead rate to get the application rate. And if all the total overhead applied is greater than actual, Greg, that's called over applied. You applied more than the actual number. So if the credit's larger than the debit, it's over applied. But if the debit, the actual, is greater than the applied amount, that would mean under applied. All right. That's not difficult, right? But I tell you, under pressure on exam conditions, people have a hard time. Don't let it be you. I wish nobody would have that kind of problem. All right. So, but now getting back, we have to prepare a schedule of cost of goods manufactured. Did I tell you last time that's on exam 1?
No.
Oh, I'm telling you now. I'm pretty sure I told everybody it was. I starred page 121. I told you I started and highlighted it. You're going to have to prepare a schedule of cost of goods manufactured. So who could tell me? I'm not going to wait for anybody now. I'm going to put the actual direct material cost on that schedule. I'm going to put the actual direct labor cost on that schedule, but I'm going to put the applied manufacturing overhead on that schedule. So those three manufacturing costs, you better remember. And then, what did I say? I'm going to whip it. I'm going to whip it good. Didn't I say that, Greg? Yes. And you remember that song.
Yeah.
You remember that song.
Could you repeat that again? You said that actual.
I'm going to whip it. I'm going to whip it good. Is that the part you needed?
No.
No, that's the part you should have remembered me saying. And you said you did. I didn't talk about the schedule of cost of goods sold. Or was that Justin?
Oh, we didn't get that far.
Oh, we didn't talk about whip it good.
You said whip was the works in process.
Yes, I did say it, didn't I, Greg?
Yeah.
Didn't we say it? I did. Justin, you must have fell asleep because I'm so boring. I just talk in a monotone voice. I never raise my voice or lower my voice. It's always constant. And it pulls you to sleep, doesn't it? You know why people whisper? Because people have to listen more intently. So maybe I should whisper more. So what's that mean? I got to put the actual direct material cost on the schedule of cost of goods sold, as well as the actual direct labor costs. But why don't I put the actual manufacturing overhead costs on that schedule? Because it takes time to get all the indirect costs in. We have to get it so we can use it to prepare a schedule of cost of goods manufactured so we can develop cost of goods sold. So when we whip it, what does that mean? We got to add the beginning work in process inventory. Vanessa, that's an inventory account. That's an asset work in process. And guess what? When we put direct materials into the work in process inventory, we put it in that actual. Didn't I mention that? And direct labor costs gets debited to the work in process account as well at the actual amount. But what did I say? The manufacturing overhead gets debited to the work in process. Did it get debited for the actual manufacturing overhead, the applied overhead, or the estimated overhead? Who said applied?
Can you repeat the question?
The question is what? Wait a second, everybody else be quiet. I'm just now focused in on Tyler. He's got on his head, I'm not sure if that's supposed to represent a person, you know, or that is it an upside, is it a sideways H? Or
It's
it
a
is
roper.
an H.
It's a roper.
Oh, it's a roper. Okay. Yeah, we can lasso some of these students in. So we're going to debit the work in process account for direct material costs. We're going to debit direct labor cost at actual. You got that? So the direct costs are put in at actual, but the manufacturing overhead is not put in at actual. What do we put the manufacturing overhead? We debit work in process for manufacturing overhead. Is that the estimated amount or the applied amount? It's not the actual.
Applied amount.
It is the applied amount. All right. Which account gets debited for the actual manufacturing overhead?
Cost of goods sold.
What the,
Wait, Sue said cost of goods sold. What kind of an account is cost of goods sold, Greg? Cost of goods sold is not an inventory account. That's an expense account. It's an expense account, Greg. We only show the expense after we sell the goods. But when we're manufacturing the product, we debit the direct material cost and the direct labor cost at actual cost. But the manufacturing overhead gets debited to work in process at the applied amount because it takes time to accumulate actual manufacturing overhead costs. We don't know how much electricity we're using that day when we're using the tools that need electricity. And there's some other overhead items that we don't know the exact amount. So guess what? If we were debiting it to the work in process account at the applied amount, when we prepare the schedule of costs of goods manufactured, we follow the same thing. We're going to show the actual direct material costs on the schedule of costs of goods manufactured. We're going to add the actual direct labor cost, and we're going to put down the applied manufacturing overhead. As much as I emphasize that today, somebody out there that wasn't in class or wasn't paying attention right now, they're going to put down the actual manufacturing overhead costs on that schedule, and it doesn't belong on there. And then we have to add the work in process, because why? The work in process at the end of one accounting period becomes the beginning work in process of the next accounting period. And those partially completed goods are going to be the first goods completed in the manufacturing. So if you're trying to determine the cost of goods manufactured, you got to take the beginning work in process and add it to the actual direct material cost, the actual direct labor cost, and the applied manufacturing overhead. And then the ending work in process, they haven't been completed. So we have to subtract that. We have to subtract that to arrive at the schedule of cost of goods manufactured. And then we have to follow that schedule up with the schedule of cost of goods sold. All right. Now, this would be a good time. This would be an excellent time to go over a schedule of cost of goods manufactured. Let's go to exercise 3-3. 3-3. Bren Bailey, could you go ahead and read that for the class? Hello? Miss Bailey, could you unmute yourself? Oh, yes. And can you read? What's that? Could you read exercise 3-3 for us? You have to unmute yourself because I can't hear you. Still, you don't. Yeah, there you go. Now say something. Oh, nothing's working. I can't hear. Must be her mic is not working properly. Conan, can you go ahead and read exercise 3.3?
Premier Corporation has provided the following data concerning last month's manufacturing operations, and it gives purchases of raw materials at 30,000, indirect materials included in manufacturing overhead for 5,000, direct labor for 58,000, manufacturing overhead applied to work in process for 87,000, under applied overhead for 4,000.
Right.
And then it gives the beginning and ending amounts for raw materials, work in process, and finished goods.
Inventory. So they give us the beginning and ending balances for the 3 inventory accounts when we have a manufacturing concern, correct? Okay, now they
Yes.
want us to prepare a schedule of cost of goods manufactured for the month. Who could tell me the first thing we're going to put on that schedule? Who could tell me the first thing we're going to put down? Tyler.
Raw material.
Yeah. Oh,
What
beginning,
did Tyler say?
beginning raw materials
That
inventory.
would be incorrect, Tyler.
Oh, direct materials, but then after that you do beginning.
No, that would be incorrect still. Kemba.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I got
Kemba.
it. I got
Wait, let's see if Kemba. Kemba,
Uh-huh.
can you answer that question? Kemba, are you there or not? You have to unmute yourself.
What was the question?
The question is, what's the first thing when we prepare the schedule of cost of goods manufactured?
What is the first thing?
What is that?
Do you put in the beginning raw material inventory?
Well, no. I'm going to give Tyler another chance because I can tell he knows where I'm coming from. It's like I've never asked this question before. Am I right, Tyler?
Yeah, you got to put the heading.
Oh, the proper heading goes first. So what are we going to put for a proper heading?
So we want to put Primera Corporation, so the name of the company, and then we want to put the what we're doing, so the schedules of.
The schedule of cost of goods manufactured.
Right, and then you want to put for which period.
Yeah, do they tell us? They said for the month. It's for the month. Which month are they talking about? Concerning last month's manufacturing. So they don't give us a specific name, right?
Would this be for the month ended?
Yes, that would be good. Now we have the proper heading. Now can you tell us what follows a proper heading?
Yeah, we would start with the heading direct materials, but then under that we would go to beginning raw materials inventory.
So the beginning raw materials would be what? Beginning raw materials.
Be $12,000.
Be $12,000, right? Isn't that what the problem has? Conan, do you agree it's $12,000?
Yes.
Thank you. So we start with the beginning raw materials, and what are we going to add to that?
Purchases of the raw materials.
Yes, when we add it up, that's the total raw materials we could have used, correct? But what are we going to subtract from it because we didn't use all of the materials?
Ending raw materials available.
Yes, the ending raw materials, if it's sitting in ending inventory, we didn't put it into production. So that's the total raw materials used in production. But now we have to adjust it because raw materials could be direct or indirect. And on the schedule of cost of goods manufactured, the first grouping of cost are direct material costs. So what do we have to do? When you took the beginning raw materials and added it to purchases and subtract the ending raw materials, that gave you the total purchases put into production. However, we're trying to calculate direct material costs. So what do we have to do?
We have to deduct indirect materials included in manufacturing overhead to get raw materials used in production.
That's right. That would be the direct raw materials used in production. So that's one more thing we have to subtract besides the ending raw materials. We have to subtract indirect materials included in the manufacturing overhead because it doesn't belong in direct material costs, correct? So when you use your calculator, what do you come up with? What is the direct materials used in production? Everybody calculate it. Get your basic calculator and calculate it. So, Conan, we'll go back to you. Tell me the beginning raw materials inventory.
12,000.
Yes. So we're going to take 12,000. What are we going to add to it? We're going to add purchases of raw materials. How much did we purchase? Was it 30,000?
30,000.
Yeah, we're going to add that to the beginning raw materials of 12. That gives us 42,000. But what are we going to subtract from it? We're going to subtract the ending raw materials, right? Because we didn't put that into production. That means we put $24,000 of raw materials into production. But the first cost we're trying to determine is the direct material costs put into production. Well, if they tell you what the indirect materials were in the manufacturing is 5,000, we got to subtract that. So when we subtract 5,000 from 24,000, that gives us 19,000. That's the direct materials used in production. Did anybody come up with that?
Yep.
All right, Tyler got that. Now, what's the next cost that has to be added in besides direct material cost?
Direct labor.
Yes. How hard is it to calculate the direct labor cost?
It gives it
It's
to you.
posted right there.
It's pretty darn simple because all you have to do is you go to payroll and say, here's my direct labors that were used in the last month. Can you tell me the total cost to pay those direct labors for the hours they worked? That would give us the actual direct labor cost put into production for that month, wouldn't it? So now we have the actual direct materials, the actual direct labor. Now, what are we going to do with manufacturing overhead? We know there is $5,000 of indirect materials. Do we know how much indirect labor? And do we know all the other manufacturing costs? Do they tell us?
Yeah.
What do they tell us, Greg?
They said direct labor is 58,000, manufacturing overhead applied to work in process is 87,000. So you add those two to 19,000.
Wait a second. Is that the actual or the applied amount? Zero? What is it? Kind of reminds me.
Manufacturing overhead applied to work in process.
We have to use the applied amount on the schedule, do we not?
Yeah.
Where else do we put the applied manufacturing overhead into? When we do a journal entry, we debit which account? Which account do we debit? Vanessa knows. What is it, Vanessa?
Is it cost of goods sold?
Not cost of goods sold. That's an expense account. You don't expense it all. Jeepers, scrapers. I thought you read the chapter. I thought you even told me you knew.
Finished good.
You put it into finished goods? That would be incorrect. When you apply overhead, which account gets debited first?
Work in process.
Yes, work in process. Didn't I tell you just a few minutes ago, we put in the actual direct material cost, the actual direct labor cost, and we put the applied manufacturing overhead into work in process. Did I mention that? Well, I'm saying it again. And guess what? All three of those go right onto the schedule of cost of goods manufactured. So we use the applied amount. And back to Greg, what was the applied amount that we're going to add to the $19,000 of direct materials, the actual direct material cost, and then the actual direct labor cost of $58,000? What are we going to add to those two numbers?
87,000.
So when you add those two to get all three together, how much do you end up with?
17.
What is that?
154,000.
You got 154,000?
Yeah.
I didn't get that. How did you come up with 154,000? Didn't you take 19,000 and add the 58,000 of direct labor costs? And then you added the $87,000 of applied manufacturing overhead? Because I got my actual direct material costs, I got my actual direct labor costs, but then I have to add the applied manufacturing overhead. Add those three numbers up and what do you get?
Oh, 164.
Now you got 164. Who got a different number? Tyler, what did you get?
I got 164 as well.
All right, tell me exactly how you got 164.
I took 19,000, which is
Hold on, I'm taking 19,000. I'm just going to do what you say. I'm taking 19,000. Then what am I doing?
you want to add 58,000.
58,000 because those are the actual costs for direct materials and direct labor. Am I right?
Correct.
All right, so that gives me 77,000. That gives me 77,000. Now what are you going to add to that?
We want to add or apply the manufacturing
We want
overhead.
to add the applied manufacturing overhead, and
Yep.
that is 164,000. So I don't know how Greg got. What did he get before? 154? I don't know how he got that. Greg, how'd you get that?
I did my math wrong.
It was just adding incorrectly, or did you
Yeah.
subtract out indirect material costs?
You were pressuring me, so I was trying to add fast, and I added wrong.
Oh, it's the pressure. Gosh, I'm looking at in the room that you're in. I see a brick wall on one side, and I see it looks like a wood panel. No, that's the door right there. So I'm assuming there's a wall right there. It's like you're in a cell. You're in a cell. The accounting prison. Oh my gosh, that would be difficult. You got to get the key to open that door. All right. Does everybody have the three costs that belong on the schedule of costs of goods manufactured? We have the actual direct material cost, we have the actual direct labor cost, and we have the applied manufacturing overhead cost. And what do we have to do now? I think we have to go back to Justin because he used to sing this in the shower. What are we going to whip? What are we going to whip? We're going to whip it good. But what is it that we're whipping?
A work in progress.
Yes. Are we going to add, subtract, divide, find the square root?
So now that we have the total manufacturing costs.
Oh, we have the manufacturing cost, but we don't have the total cost to manufacture the goods.
No, we do not. We must take the total manufacturing costs, add the beginning work in inventory, and then
The beginning work in process.
process.
inventory. All right.
The whip inventory.
Yeah, we're going to whip it good. We're going to add the beginning. And what are we going to subtract
the
out?
ending.
There you go. So there's how many things we got to remember? How many different things do we have to remember?
4.
Look at my screen. Can you see something? What do you see in my screen?
I see wrestling fingers.
Oh, how many fingers do you see?
5 bent wrestling.
Five things we got to remember. How many? 5. So when you're taking the pressure under the exam, you go 5 guys. Oh, I got to have 5 items. I got to have the actual direct material cost, the actual direct labor cost. Have to have the applied manufacturing overhead. I got to add the beginning work in process and subtract the ending work in process. So do that and finish this schedule and tell me what you get. Who has it finished?
155,000.
Is that how they taught you in math class? 155,000? I thought it's 155,000. All right. And then we're done with the schedule of cost of goods manufactured. Now we can prepare the schedule of cost of goods sold. What's the first thing that we need when we're preparing a schedule of cost of goods sold?
Beginning finished goods inventory.
It's the beginning finished goods inventory. So all 3 inventory accounts are involved here. Vanessa, are you listening? Can you respond to that?
I am.
You are? What are the
Yeah,
3 inventory accounts that belong on the schedule of costs of goods manufactured?
The applied manufacturing overhead.
No, that's not an
the-
inventory account. I said, what inventory accounts go on the schedule of costs of goods manufactured?
Direct labor.
Direct labor is not an inventory account.
Oh, Jesus. I don't know.
The chapter. You told me you took notes on the chapter. You told me you read the chapter, took notes on the chapter, and you knew what inventory accounts are. I'm questioning your knowledge.
My knowledge is out the door with 3 children at home.
Oh, that could do it. But you
Yes.
love them. You love them, don't you?
I do.
And the joy they give you is greater than the grief. Am I correct on that? When you raise
It's still up to the
children,
jury.
when you raise children, you get both. You get the joy along
do.
with the grief. And hopefully the joy is greater than the grief. There's certain times during their growing up years where you get more grief than the joy. The joy
Very
is
true.
in the early years when they're babies and stuff and they're cute as all get out, right?
And they love you.
And the
Yes.
toddlers are pretty sweet and they think mommy and daddy are wonderful, the best people in the world. And then they hit that age group where they rebel and they cause
Yes.
grief. They cause grief. But in the end, if you raise them right, they'll come back to you and you'll get to enjoy them when they are adults again. So
Yes.
anyways, so can you tell me which inventory accounts belong on the schedule of cost of goods manufactured?
Raw materials, work in
Raw
process,
materials
and finished
inventory
goods.
belongs on there for sure. It is. You have the beginning that you add to the purchases of raw materials to give you the goods you have available to use, and you subtract out the ending raw material. So you use both the beginning and ending. And then you have to adjust for any indirect raw materials that were put into manufacturing overhead to arrive at the direct material cost. All right, so that's the raw materials inventories is on that schedule of cost of goods manufactured. Any other inventory accounts? Gosh, if only I had a whip, I'd whip you.
My brain is fried.
Well, what's whip indicate? Work
Oh,
in process.
process.
Work in process. You add the beginning work in process and you subtract the ending work in process. So those two inventory accounts belong on the schedule of cost of goods manufactured. Which inventory accounts belong on the schedule of cost of goods sold, Vanessa?
Inventory accounts and cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold is an expense account.
It is, but what inventory accounts belong on the schedule of cost of goods sold? Hold on, Jared's shaking up something in there. I think it's a favorite drink. Go ahead, tell us what inventory account.
Come on, Jared, help me.
Would it be ending inventory?
Should be ending inventory. Which ending inventory? The raw materials, the finished goods, the work in process. And you're wearing the Green Bay Packer hat, even though they lost.
I do not want to talk about it.
Oh man, it was a heartbreaker. Aaron Rodgers looked good at times, but the old man, the 43-year-old man.
No, we kicked a field goal with 2 minutes left, and we're down by 8. I don't want to hear
it.
it.
Who's the idiot on that team? Which coach made that call? Aaron Rodgers didn't make that call, did he?
Gives the ball back to Tom Brady with 2 minutes.
No, why would
we don't
you
even kick an onside kick?
What the heck is that? Why do you give a guy that's won 6 Super Bowls back the ball with 2 minutes to go? What was he thinking?
I have zero clue.
Did they fire that coach, I hope?
They need to.
No, he's brand new.
He's brand new. So we're going to give him
his first two seasons were 13 and 3.
We're going to let him off the hook, Jared, because he's brand new?
Well, no, his first 2 seasons were 13 and 3. So
not good enough. Did
That's
he win
pretty
a Super
good.
Bowl? Did he win a Super Bowl?
First 2 seasons we go to NFC Championship.
All right. Okay. All right. We're going to forgive him for this third time, right? This is his third season, you said?
No, well, we're going into it. This was just the second season.
All right. Well, we'll go easy on him since he got us to the championship game. But boy, it's even colder in Green Bay this time of year now.
I know, and Tampa Bay should have went up there and just sucked. But they
should have. But Brady, he was bred in Patriot territory, which is cold weather.
Brady didn't even have a good game. It's just our defense let them do so much crap to us. Kevin King let a bomb go with 1 second left.
How was the Tampa Bay defense? How many
sacks
did Rodgers go down? Because the offensive line was decimated.
we're missing
draft-
like over half of our offensive line.
Yes, they didn't draft any offensive linemen. They didn't draft any receivers, did they? No,
No.
they drafted another quarterback, and that was like poking Aaron Rodgers right in the eye because we don't think you're good enough.
That's also the same thing we did with Rodgers and Brett Favre, though. Brett Favre was not happy with that draft.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't. And look what happened.
Well, I mean, we have 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks back to back. I can't complain.
No, you can't. You think you're going to have a third one?
Jordan Love is pretty good.
Only time will tell. Time will tell. But let's say they didn't get a quarterback this last time and they got an awesome receiver.
I know.
Could one more receiver might have made the difference?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
But our weapons that we had developed really well, and I think they knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, but if you were general manager, you would have gotten Aaron Rodgers what he wanted, a receiver, and they could have been in the championship game. But anyway,
I would have got better defensive tackles, edge rushers.
That might have stopped Brady and the Buccaneers.
We didn't have pressure on him the whole game. He had so much time.
And he's 43 years old. Let's say you got a bunch of young defensive Chargers coming in, blitzing them and taking them out. And
it doesn't make sense because the week prior we played the Rams, which is the #1 defense in the whole league, and we smoked them. But against Brady in our own stadium, we get killed. It makes no sense.
It seemed like they were just peeing all over themselves, weren't they? Poor guys.
Well, I mean, Kevin King let up 2 touchdowns just because he was too slow. With 1 second left before the half, Tom Brady.
That was pathetic. That was
pathetic.
Like the dagger right there.
If that wouldn't have happened, we would have won the game.
Yeah. If I was the coach, I probably would have fired him on the spot.
I hope they do. It's
probably would have pulled you out of the stands. I probably pulled you out of the stands on defense. Anyways, let's don't talk about it. I know you didn't want to talk about it. All right, let's go on to the more exciting topic of accounting. So now we all know on the schedule of cost of goods manufactured, we're going to have the raw materials, the beginning and ending in there, as well as the work in process. We start the whole schedule off with the beginning raw materials inventory, and we end with we're subtracting the ending work in process to arrive at the cost of goods manufactured. And then, Vanessa, back to you because you're the inventory queen. Tell me which inventory goes on the schedule of cost of goods sold. Inventory queen, if you know what I mean. Remember that song?
Whip it.
Whip it, whip it.
Work in process.
No, work in process does not belong on the schedule of cost of goods sold. Who can tell me which inventory account belongs on the schedule of cost of goods sold? Finished goods, that's correct. Do we put the beginning finished goods down first or the ending finished goods? I saw Tyler. Tyler was shaking his head he was shaking it in the affirmative, then he was shaking it in the negative. Which is it?
You start with the beginning inventory.
Oh, you start with the beginning finished goods inventory. What do we add to it?
Cost of goods manufactured.
That's correct. And then that gives us what? The cost of goods we can sell. So we can sell the goods that are already finished from the beginning, plus we can sell the ones that got manufactured this time period. Those two added together would be the total we could sell. What do we have to subtract from it?
Ending inventory for the finished goods.
Yes, the ending finished goods. If they're in the ending inventory, they didn't get sold. So you got to subtract those. And what's that give us when we subtract the ending finished goods?
Gives us our unadjusted cost of goods sold.
That's a good point. It's the unadjusted cost of goods sold. Why do we have to adjust the cost of goods sold? What fact in preparing the schedule of cost of goods manufactured requires us to adjust the cost of goods sold?
Because we have to adjust for either the over-applied or under-applied. And in this case, I believe it said it was
Wait, the under or over-applied what? Materials? Under or over-applied labor? Under or overhead? What are you under and over applied?
The The overhead manufacturing cost, the applied.
The applied. Oh, when we apply overhead, that means that's not actual. We got to get the actual in there. So if we put the applied in there, we have to adjust if we had an over application or an under application of overhead. And what did they tell that tipped us off in this problem? What fact did they give us that would tell us?
The overhead's applied or under applied.
It's under applied. Why do you state that?
Because, well, it says it.
What's it say exactly?
It just says under applied overhead of 4,000 is which.
Oh, they did. They
Yeah.
did, didn't they? If they didn't tell us that, but they gave us the manufacturing overhead account, what would be the difference? We know how much is the applied manufacturing overhead? How much was applied in this problem?
87,000.
87,000. If we know that we under applied the overhead, what's the actual?
It'd be 91,000.
91,000? And that's under applying? Is that what you mean by under applying? You applied less than actual? Is it that simple? It is, isn't it? So if we under applied by 4,000, we applied 87,000, then we would have 91,000 of actual manufacturing overhead costs during the time period. And in what account would we see that number, Tyler? Or wait, does Greg know? Greg, do you know or not?
What's that?
Oh, okay. I know you're locked up in that cell. Back to you, Tyler.
Be work in process inventory.
No, it's not in work in process. Greg, back to you.
No.
How do we know? Where's the 91,000? 91,000 actual. It doesn't go in work in process. Let me tell you, you just had a major violation. Major violation. You ever watch that Channel 12 and they tell you which restaurants had major violations? Oh, yeah. Well, you got a major violation here because you're debiting the actual overhead to the work in process account. And that's not what you do. The work in process account gets debited for the applied manufacturing overhead. So which account gets debited for the actual? Greg, go ahead. No, cost of goods sold's an expense. Go ahead, Greg. You look, he's peeing all over himself. If he sees in Green Bay, it'd be all frozen.
Finished goods.
Oh my gosh. Not finished goods. I'm going to have to call on one of the women. Clarissa, come on. Come to the aid of these men. Wait, all I see is lips moving. Go ahead. You're going to have to speak. I guess your mic's not working. Or you're doing a good job of lip syncing, making me think that your mic's not working. Can anybody hear Clarissa? Can you hear her, Greg?
Mm-mm.
I can't hear her either. I saw her lips moving. Who can tell us? Vanessa? Jared? Who out there knows? Greg, can you tell everybody what the question was?
Mm-mm.
No, you couldn't. I can, though.
Adjusted cost of goods sold?
Wait, 91,000. Let's go back to the guy that started this off. His name's Tyler. Tyler, you said 91,000 is the actual manufacturing overhead. And you don't know which account we showed the actual manufacturing overhead cost. Let me tell you something. You better write this down. Everybody better write this down. I want to see you put a T account. You understand that, Greg? They're called T accounts. I did show T accounts last time. I can't show it this time because I don't have the document camera. All I can do is point my finger at you guys and tell you to write it down. Do a T, and at the top of the T, put manufacturing overhead. Manufacturing overhead. Greg, what kind of an account is manufacturing overhead? I asked you once today.
What kind of an account is a manufacturing?
Yes, what kind of an account is manufacturing overhead?
That's an asset account.
No, it's not.
Temporary.
Oh,
Who
temporary.
said temporary?
It's a clearing account.
Well, that's right, but somebody said temporary account ahead of that. Was that Stu? You're
That's me.
100% right, Stu. It is a temporary account. And Greg, what else is it called?
A clearing account.
A clearing account. What's it clearing out?
Either the under-applied or the over-applied.
Exactly. Which side of that T account is actual manufacturing overhead costs?
Credit side.
Which side?
The credit side.
No, you're peeing all over yourself, Tyler, again.
Debit.
The debit side. You're right. You're right, Deshante. It is the debit side. You show the actual manufacturing overhead costs. What's the credit side, Greg?
Over-applied.
No, the credit side, you're crediting manufacturing overhead for the applied amount.
The last 4 digits.
For my account, hold on. It's 9352.
9352.
All right. Am I right? We always debit manufacturing overhead for the actual to the account manufacturing overhead. But the manufacturing overhead account gets credited for the applied amount. Put that down in your notes. On the debit side, put actual. On the credit side, put applied. What's that, Tyler?
So just to check my understanding, because I'm seeing what you're saying now. So once we, because like in the homework, you'll have a bunch of journal entries. Every time we're debiting, those are actual costs that are going into manufacturing, and that's why we're debiting.
Exactly.
And at the end is when we apply the predetermined rate to the overhead application, and that's what gives us our
applied amount. And the journal entry is debit work in process and credit manufacturing overhead. So the debits are all of the actual manufacturing overhead costs. The credit side is every time you applied overhead to the different jobs. The difference between what you applied and actual, that's what we have to adjust cost of goods sold for. That's the simplest method when we're trying to adjust cost of goods sold. If we applied more, in this case, we under applied the overhead. 91,000 was debited in the manufacturing overhead account, which is a temporary or clearing account. So all the debits are actual manufacturing overhead cost. On the right side or the credit side of manufacturing overhead is every time we applied the overhead. So in this case, our overhead, manufacturing overhead, the manufacturing overhead account has a credit of 87,000. Do you see that? Write that down in a T account and put manufacturing overhead at the top, and in the credit side, the bottom is 87,000. Because we under applied it, that means the actual manufacturing overhead must have been $91,000. So 91,000 is greater than applied of 87. And so you draw a line under both of them. And what's the balance? A $4,000 amount on the debit side, correct?
Yeah.
And is that your mom or who is that?
My sister.
Oh, your sister. Okay. Is she an accounting major?
Nah, she's going to nursing.
Yeah, but she's just staying in the room because she's just enamored with this accounting knowledge she's getting for free. I better send a bill to her. No,
You should.
I'm only joking. So anyways, someday I might be dying in that hospital and she's keeping me alive, so I better be nice to her. But I'm so old and cranky, I just won't die probably. So now, do you see that T account? So 91,000 would be debited. That's actual. 87,000 would be credited. And then when you subtract the two, we end up with a $4,000 debit balance. Now we have to make the adjustment. We got to close out that temporary account. We got to close it out. So how do we close it out? Stu, can you tell me? We have a $91,000 debit. And on the credit side, we have 87,000. When we net the two, we end up with a $4,000 debit. So what's the journal entry to close that account out, Stu?
You're gonna debit cost of goods sold for 4,000 and credit manufacturing overhead for 4,000.
That's exactly right. So now our manufacturing overhead has a zero balance. We adjusted 4,000. We added it to the cost of goods sold because we underapplied it. Our actual overhead was actually more, but we didn't know it because we don't get the cost of manufacture all of them during the time we're manufacturing. We got to estimate it. We estimate it using a predetermined overhead rate, and we apply overhead. So at the end of the year, we have to make that adjustment. And so we have to increase cost of goods sold, 4,000, and we credit our manufacturing overhead account to zero that account out. Okay, is everybody good about how to close out our under or over applied overhead? In this case, we under applied the overhead. That means
So-
manufacturing overhead account has a debit balance. We got to credit it, and we got a debit cost.
Quick question.
Okay, question.
If we
Vanessa.
if we over applied for 4,000, then we
Okay,
would
time
debit
out,
4,000.
time out. You can't be asking me more than one question at a time. So if we're going to over apply it, if actual's 91,000, do a T account. On the debit side, you got 91,000 actual manufacturing overhead. To it to be over applied, how much would the credit be for?
95,000.
Exactly. Now, when you net the two, you end up with a $4,000 credit balance. To close it out, you would have to debit it, and you would credit cost of goods sold because we overdid it. We applied more overhead than the actual. So now, are you getting it? When you apply it, you're estimating how much the overhead is to the jobs. But at the end of the year, because when we prepare financial statements, usually 2 or 3 months after the end of the year, we got all the information we need to calculate the actual manufacturing overhead costs. And we can compare what was applied and what was actual. If we applied more, we're over applied. In this problem, we under applied. Our actual was greater. So the simplest way to adjust cost of goods sold is to either increase or decrease our cost of goods sold. And then the opposite, debit or credit, would go to manufacturing overhead. The harder of the two methods of allocating our under or over applied overhead is using the proportional method. And that's shown at the end of the chapter. All right. So now, does anybody have a number for me for the cost of goods manufactured? I had you go through a schedule of cost of goods manufactured. How much did you come up with for the total? I think we already answered that, but let me just make sure everybody has that. What did everybody get for the schedule of cost of goods manufactured?
155,000.
155,000 is correct. And I'll send you the solution. How about the schedule of cost of goods sold? After we make the adjustment for the underapplied overhead, how much would we have for our adjusted cost of goods sold, which is the final number on the schedule of cost of goods sold? It would be the adjusted cost of goods sold.
152.
How did you arrive at that 152,000?
I started with the beginning finished goods inventory of 35.
Yeah, tell us the numbers. Tell us the numbers clearly and concisely.
All right. I started with the beginning finished goods inventory of 35,000. Then I added the cost of goods manufactured,
Which is?
155,000.
Okay, when you add those two numbers up, you get?
I got the cost of goods available for sale, which is 190,000.
Okay, stop right there because we have people writing. So say it again. Beginning finished goods was how much?
Beginning finished goods inventory was 35,000. And then I added the cost of goods manufactured of 155,000.
Yes, that was 155,000. That's from doing the schedule of cost of goods manufactured. You have to do that, so then you can add it to the beginning finished goods inventory to get your cost of goods available for sale. And what was that cost of goods available for sale?
190,000.
Yes, and then what did you do?
And then I subtracted the ending finished goods inventory, which was 42,000.
So let me repeat it. So you took the ending finished goods inventory of 42,000, subtracted it from cost of goods available for sale of 190,000. And what did you get then?
I got the unadjusted cost of goods sold, which was 148,000.
And then what did you do?
I added the underapplied overhead of 4,000.
Yes, because we underapplied the overhead, the actual is 4,000 more than what we had applied. We have to add it to the unadjusted cost of goods sold. And how much did you get for your adjusted cost of goods sold?
152,000.
You got it right. Okay, I'm just going to scroll. Raise your hand if you got it right. So I see 1, I see 2, 3, I see 4 hands. Okay, the mime had it right. Right, Clarissa? Okay, very good. All right, anybody have questions on that? That's good. Do you think we beat that horse to death, Justin? You got it now, Justin?
Yes.
Okay, if I ask you next class period, you'll be able to answer all the questions I have for that, right? Now, let's look at exercise 3-5. 3-5, we have to know what entries, what journal entries, how to write the journal entries. So we have Polaris Company uses job order costing system. Boy, I can use one of those right now with a plow on it. As much snow that's sitting in my driveway probably there. It's by Snowball Road. Whew. The following transactions occurred in October. So they got transactions A through H. Required, prepare a journal entry to record the transactions given above. So raw materials purchased on account. Who could tell me what journal entry I need? What do I need to debit? What do I need to credit?
Debit raw materials and.
Okay, so you're going to debit an asset. You're acquiring raw materials inventory. You're going to debit raw materials inventory for 210,000. What are you going to credit?
Accounts payable.
Accounts payable because we bought it on account. We didn't pay cash. So you have to show a liability. In the problem, it can say they paid cash, but they didn't. They bought it on account. So that's a liability, accounts payable. Very good.
And I stepped away for a second. Can you tell me which one we're on real quick?
A, that was letter A.
For which exercise?
Exercise 3-5.
Okay, thank you.
And where's your book at? Is it digital form?
I have an ebook. Yeah.
Is it a pain in the butt?
It's a total pain in the,
I told you, didn't I? Yeah. But no, you didn't want to listen to the old man. Just like the experts didn't listen to the old man named Tom Brady. He showed them why he won 6 Super Bowls, and he's been to the Super Bowl, 9 times before this time around? Is this number 10 that he's going to a Super Bowl? He's got a pathetic 7-3 record in Super Bowls, right? He could win another one, couldn't he? Yeah. Is he considered the best quarterback of all times? The best record in Super Bowl appearances?
Rodgers is better.
Oh, what's his record in Super Bowl appearances?
His overall stats are better. I don't care about Super Bowl.
Oh, you don't care about the Super Bowl rings. Let Tom Brady wear them all. Nobody in Green Bay wants a Super Bowl ring as long as he's got the stats.
Hey, it's all about my Notre Dame boy, Joe
Montana. He got the stats, so we're supposed to be the best. Just like when Golden State had the best record ever in the NBA. They thought they were world champs. But guess what? They had my Cleveland Cavaliers down 3-1. And the last game's being played at, guess where? Golden State. Somehow, that lousy Cleveland Cavaliers didn't listen to everybody that they had won the most games ever in the NBA, so we should just give them the trophy. What happened then? All of a sudden, it was 3-2. Then it was 3-3. Then it was going down to the fourth quarter. What really sealed the deal when I forget which Golden State player was going up for an easy layup. Then this guy flew over the top of his own teammate to block the ball up against the glass so the bucket didn't go in. And then the Cavs went down to the other end. Guess what? LeBron James had the ball. What did he do? he shuffled it to Kyrie, who hit a beautiful three. All you heard was the zing of the strings. And guess what? The Cavaliers were world champs. Recall that championship?
I got one question for you, Ed.
Yes, you do.
How do you feel after that Buckeyes championship game?
I felt pretty good how they beat up on Clemson when when the Clemson coach says, I got you guys 11th. Well, they were better than 11th because they knocked off number 2 Clemson at the time, didn't they? So I feel all right. And which team is yours? Is it Arizona State or which team?
Heck no. No, I'm Notre Dame all the way.
Notre Dame? And how does it feel? I like Notre Dame too. They're my second favorite. Well, maybe not. They they took a beating.
Yep, we were kind of like, we played Bama and we didn't look too hot. So I'm ready for some better recruiting. We got to get better at recruiting.
Yep, and Saban's excellent at it, isn't he? He always has the running backs. He's always got the quarterbacks, the receivers. But hats off to Saban, man. He knows how to play the game at the college level for sure. All right, we're on exercise 3-5, Tyler. I liked your style, how you kind of like stalled on it. Now, let me read it and you tell me what the journal entry is, Tyler. Raw materials purchased on account, $210,000. We already did this one. What are we going to debit? What are we going to credit?
We're debiting raw materials for 210, and then we're going to credit accounts payable for 210.
Yes, accounts payable. And then in B, Tyler, raw materials used in production, $190,000. $178,000 was direct materials and $12,000 was indirect materials. What needs to be debited? What needs to be credited?
So we're going to debit work in process and manufacturing overhead, but for work in process, we're going to debit the direct materials. So that's 178.
That's right. And I want to emphasize this because on the exam, I see people put down the words direct materials, debit, 178,000. That's wrong. You debit work in process inventory for the actual direct materials. And then what else are you debiting besides the work in process?
It's going to be manufacturing overhead.
Yes, you debit manufacturing overhead because the actual manufacturing overhead gets debited to manufacturing overhead. And what do you credit?
Raw materials.
No, you don't, do you? Oh,
Yeah.
yes, you do. Yes, you do. You're right. All right, you're on top of it, Tyler. Continue. C, we're just going to keep going with you. It's like Jeopardy. You just keep winning. You just keep piling up the cash.
Ed, are we going to have to do the description after each journal?
That would be ideal, but we're not living in an ideal world because this is not really, we're not being so much a bean counter. We're just trying to be a manager. We have to know what the accountants are doing, but what do we do when we have accrued direct labor of 90,000, indirect labor of 110,000? Tell us.
We're going to debit work in process again, debit which one are we on, C?
Yeah, letter C.
Okay, so I believe with this one, we are going to debit work in process.
That's correct. For how much?
And for 90,000.
Yes, you debit work in process for the actual direct labor. And what else are you going to debit?
Then we're going to debit manufacturing overhead for 110 for the indirect labor cost.
Right. Manufacturing overhead gets debited for indirect, the actual indirect. The actual direct goes to work in process. He's starting to understand that.
Yep.
All right. And what are we going to credit?
For this one, I think we're going to credit if it's, I think it would be a credit.
We accrued it. That means we didn't pay it yet.
So it would be salary and wages expense?
Not expense. You don't credit an expense account.
Salary and wages payable. I'm sorry.
That's right. We have a liability. Since we didn't pay them, we accrued the wages. We owe them. So we're going to credit the liability, salaries and wages payable. I'll let you continue. Letter D, we had depreciation recorded on the factory equipment of $40,000.
So for this one, we will debit manufacturing overhead for 40, and then we're going to credit accumulated depreciation for 40.
That is exactly correct. So again, we debit the actual manufacturing overhead account. All right. And we credit accumulated depreciation. All right. And E, other manufacturing overhead cost accrued during October, 70,000.
So that will be a debit to depreciation expense and a credit.
Wait
to-
a second. In E, other manufacturing overhead
Oh, I'm
costs.
sorry.
Other manufacturing overhead costs.
So it's going to be debit to manufacturing overhead for 70, and
Yes.
then credit to accumulated depreciation for 70.
Well, these are costs that have been accrued. These are not depreciation on other equipment or buildings in the manufacturing operations. There are other manufacturing overhead costs. Because if they told you the depreciation on the factory building, then you would still have manufacturing overhead, but you're only going to show accumulated depreciation for items that would be depreciated. But these are other manufacturing overhead costs that we accrued. We didn't pay for them. So we're going to debit manufacturing overhead. And what are we going to credit?
Accounts payable.
That's correct. That's correct. All right. Letter F, the company applies manufacturing overhead costs to production using a predetermined overhead rate of $8 per machine hour. The total of 30,000 machine hours were used in October. So there we have the actual hours multiplied times the predetermined overhead rate. That gives us the total amount applied for manufacturing overhead. Jasmine, do you know what account gets debited and what account gets credited?
Would it be the manufacturing overhead?
No, not for overhead that's being applied. Can anybody help her? When we apply overhead, which account gets debited?
Work in
Great.
process. You debit work in process.
That's right. We have to debit work in process. $8 times 30,000 hours. Is that $240,000 debit to work in process? And we credit manufacturing overhead for the applied overhead, do we not? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in G, jobs that cost us $520,000, according to their job cost sheets, were completed during the month of October and transferred to finished goods. Greg, can you tell me what happens there?
Oh my gosh. You debit salaries expense.
No, you don't. You debit finished goods. If you're transferring these goods that are now complete, you're going to debit the inventory account, finished goods inventory. And what are we going to credit? Anybody?
Work in process.
That's right. It's no longer being worked on. It's finished. So you debit finished goods inventory when you transfer it, and you credit work in process. And then H, in H, jobs that cost $480,000 to complete were shipped to customers. And the job, they sell them 25% above cost. So we have two journal entries here. What are those two journal entries? We're going to show the sales. Well, what's the cost? The cost of goods sold is going to be $480,000. You got to multiply $480,000 times 1.25. What does that give you if you multiply it by 1.25?
600,000.
That gives you the selling price, doesn't it? That gives you the selling price. One is 100%, 480,000. 25.25 or 25%. That's the markup they're getting, the margin. So we're going to debit accounts receivable 600,000. We're going to credit sales 600,000. So we show the units sold at the selling price, and then we show the cost of goods sold at cost. We debit cost of goods sold 480,000, and we credit finished goods. And then we're supposed to do the over under applied overhead for part 2, but we've run out of time. So, all right. And then exercise 9 and 10, I'll just have to send you the solutions because that's when we have to allocate to 3 different accounts. We're going to allocate to the work in process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold. That's the harder way to allocate. You allocate on proportion. And you could read that part of the chapter to do that part of the homework. All right, we're 5 minutes over, but I won't tell the administration, so you won't get a bill for those 5 extra minutes. Anyways, we're starting to get it. It takes, what's it take? Repetition, repetition, repetition. I repeat myself a lot because I want you to get it. Now, it's your job to do your work and do the homework. If you don't do it right the first time, do it again. And you could get help from me. You can get help from Jacob. You can get help from each other. And if I go over it next time and you get it wrong, get a piece of paper and rework it till you get it right. If you do that, you're going to make it through this class. I would guarantee you do all the work and you do that one extra step. That's the one extra step students don't want to do, is to redo the homework. But should you be able to do it a lot faster now? You should. And you don't have to be nice and neat. You can abbreviate and go quick. And that's what you need to do. If you want to become good at something and get fast at it, how do you get fast at these problems? By just practicing once? No, the first time you do it takes you time. You got to look at the book's example and follow it, right? And then you got to memorize the format. And then once you get the format memorized, you can kind of go through this pretty quick. All right, that's all I have. If we have people with questions, you can hang out because I'll keep the next 10 or 15 minutes. I'll answer any questions anybody has. All right.
I
So
heard that Jacob was sick. Do you know if he's still going to do Zoom tutoring tomorrow?
I don't know. I don't know. So anyways, I got a Zoom class tonight, but I do have time where I have my office hours. Can you see me, or can we Zoom during my office hours, or stay after class? I can work with you still. I mean, we didn't get to go through part 2 of exercise 3.5, and then I wanted to go over exercise 3.9 on over and under applied overhead. And then exercise 3.10. Oh, yeah. So I'll just send you those solutions. And you can take a quick peek at them, see if they're going to help you. All right.
Thank you, Ed.
You guys are welcome. Have a great one. All right. So if you
Thank you,
need
Jim.
me for extra help,